Okay, good morning. We are doing today Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. We are in Good Chodesh. We are hopefully get a little bit to Nun Gimel Beis. We are right now at the last lines on Nun Beis Amud Beis. Gemara told us that Chanina Misur explained what's the reason that the Mishnah had told us. The Mishnah had said that the Ein Mevarchim Leil Aner Leil B'Sam Shalakum, that you don't make a bracha on the Ner B'Sam of a Chai, and then it said also V'Leil Aner B'Sam Shal Avodah Zarah. So the Gemara said, well, say for Avodah Zarah, there must be the first case. It's not talking about Avodah Zarah. So the Gemara said, Mr. answer, no, it's my time talking about. What's the reason that you say that Ein Mevarchim Leil Aner B'Sam of a guy? Because of the fact that we have a concern. It's giving a reason because the stam nasiba of a guy is for Avodah Zarah. Just one point that I didn't mention yesterday is that we're saying that B'chinim Misur is saying a matam. We're giving a reason for the first case. We said Ein Mevarchim Leil Aner B'Sam Shalakum. The reason is because of the same thing about that we say later on that Ein Mevarchim Leil Aner B'Sam Shal Avodah Zarah, and Rav of the Masibas of a guy is for Avodah Zarah. But in between, there's a case in the Mishnah of Ein Mevarchim Leil Aner B'Sam Shal Mesim. So I don't really understand matam. If it was really there for a matam to give a reason for the first case, then we should follow it along with the case of the Avodah Zarah, not follow along with the case of a mace. So I leave that as a question. Okay, next Gemara says the Martan Rabban Arsha Shavas Mevarchin Alav Shalosh Shavas Ein Mevarchin Alav. Everyone heard of the concept of an Ersha Shavas, a light that was utilized on it always comes up by Yom Kippur by using an Ersha Shavas not to light a new candle after Yom Kippur. Use something that was utilized all Yom Kippur, and that's what should be used for Motzei Yom Kippur. So, what is the idea of an Ersha Shavas? Is one that's not being utilized inappropriately. It was lit on Shabbos. So, Ersha Shavas, if you have a light that rested, so then Mevarchin Alav, and you could make a bracha on it of Bar Merah. But for Shalosh Shavas, Ein Mevarchin Alav. If it did not rest, meaning it was lit on Shabbos, so then you would not be able to make a bracha of Bar Merah on it. Says the Gemara. Milo Shavas, what does it mean that it wasn't rested? What happened? Now we're talking more Gimel. If you're going to say that it wasn't rested, machmas malacha, what does that mean? Meaning that it was lit on Shabbos. And what we're saying is that you can't use it. Even if it was utilized for malacha on Shabbos that was mutter. What's the example? For example, you have somebody who's sick or the like. The Gemara says that that's the case. You're saying you cannot use on Motzei Shabbos for Bar Merah a fire that was lit on Shabbos, but it was a situation of Pikuach Nefesh. It was a situation of a pregnant woman. Whatever it was, the situation was mutter to light a candle. You're saying that you cannot use that candle Motzei Shabbos because it wasn't Shabbos? That can't be. By the time you have a brayso that says we have a brayso that says that a candle that is utilized for a pregnant woman or for a sick person, then you are able to use it for Bar Merah. So what do you mean that what you say? If it's Shalosh Shavas Ein Mevarchin Alav, you see that you are able to use a candle that was Shalosh Shavas, provided that what? It wasn't used for something that was inappropriate. But if it was appropriately lit on Shabbos, then you could use it. So the Gemara's answer, we mean to say that when we say you're not able to make a bracha Bar Merah on a ner shavas, a ner shalosh shavas, that is a situation where it wasn't shavas from, it was not shavas in an inappropriate fashion. But obviously, if it wasn't shavas in an appropriate fashion, it's a mitzvah to light a candle on Shabbos. So you have a sakana or a sick or whatever it is. That's totally fine to use that candle on Motzei Shabbos. Tanya Namiyach, you have a proof of this from another price. Ashoshes, so I said the lekas for lekas kol gulay. Ashoshes is like a look at Rashi, lantern, right? And that's what Rashi's saying, lantern. So you have a lantern, a lamp. So I said the lekas for lekas kol gulay. If it was able to be lit a whole Shabbos, I guess it has a lot of wax or whatever, was able to last the whole time. So then you're able to use it, no problem. on Motzei Shabbos. That's not considered to be an issue at all. I'm not sure exactly what the raya is per se, um, but but um, but because in this case it was not lit on Shabbos, it was lit before Shabbos, it was just lit the whole time. But either way, so what do we end up coming out with? Is the situation of an Arsha Shabbos is you mavarich on it. If it's an Arsha Lo Shabbos, you're not mavarich on it, provided that it was not Shabbos ba'avera. But if it was not Shabbos in a permitted way, in other words, it was lit to help a chaya or a chayil or something like that, then of course you're able to use that light on Motzei Shabbos. All right, so the rest of the page here, the rest of the daf, we're going to be focused on all types of situations of candles, some as they relate to Goyim, etc. So Tana Rabbanon, another Gemara about this, is Nachri shehidlik mi Yisrael. The Yisrael shehidlik mi Nachri. So if you have a guy that lit a candle from a Jew, right? Rashi explains that this took place on Motzei Shabbos, Motzei Shabbos. But after the dark on Motzei Shabbos, fine. But again, so you have a Nachri who lit a candle from a Yid, Yisrael shehidlik mi Nachri, and a Yid who lit a candle from a guy. So we're talking about a situation on Motzei Shabbos where a Yid is lighting a candle now from a guy, or a guy is lighting one from a Yid. And the question is whether or not you're able to what? Use that light on Motzei Shabbos to make the Bar Meri Haish. So the Gemara says, Mevarchan Alav, that's not a problem. You can make the bracha of Bar Meri Haish. However, Nachri Minachri ain't Mevarchan Alav. But if a guy is holding a light, a candle, that he lit from another guy, then we say you can't make a bracha on that. You can't make the bracha Meri Haish on that situation. So the Marana says, I don't understand. Maishna Nachri Minachri Delay. What's the reason that you say that the Nachri who lit a candle from another guy, we're talking about on Motzei Shabbos, that you can't use it? Why? Mishum Deloy Shabbos. Because you're going to say that one is a problem. It wasn't Shabbos, this candle. The guy lit his light on Shabbos, and then this other guy is using that light and lit from that light, so you can't use that. So the Gemara says, but then what's the difference? If it's a situation where a Nachri lit from another Nachri, you say you can't use that because that original Nachri lit on Shabbos, so then what's the nafkamina? If you have a Yid who lit from a guy, the Yid also lit from a guy who had lit his candle on Shabbos. So wouldn't you run into the same problem? So Ihachi Nachri mi Yisrael, Ihaki Yisrael mi Nachri Nami Halei Shabbos. If so, a Jew who lit a candle from a guy should also not able to be used. Why? Because it was also the same problem. It wasn't Shabbos. So what's the nafkamina? So now the Gemara has an interesting sort of side point. It says, maybe you want to say that the original Isser is gone. And now there's something new here. In other words, the original light, the original flame that was lit on Shabbos, is that the current flame they're using now? So the Gemara wants to suggest maybe what we could say is that the original Isser that was here, not to use a light that wasn't Shabbos, because the guy lit his light on Shabbos, and now you're using from that light, so you shouldn't do it because it was not kindled appropriately. So the Gemara says, who says that the light that you have right now is the same light that you had on Shabbos? Maybe we could suggest that the original Isser is gone. This is a new fire. And in the hands of the Yisrael now was created. In other words, forget, is there a difference between a Nachri and a Nachri and Yisrael from a Nachri now? The Yisrael lit a candle from a Nachri. The Nachri created his light on Shabbos. So you may say, okay, shouldn't use that light. Why? Because it wasn't Shabbos. So the Gemara asks, but why are you making the assumption that the light that the Yid is using now is the original flame? It's not the original flame. It's something new, right? It was kindled from this guy's flame. It's a new thing. And the original Isser is gone. The Isser of not using a light that wasn't Shabbos, that's now not here. And this is something new. Doesn't want to, can't say that. Why? Because at the time we have a price. The Gemara says in Bay and Lamates, if over there the Gemara says if somebody brings out a flame into Rosh Hashanah, he could be chayiv, or he could be pater. The Gemara says over there that what does it mean? Rosh Hashanah is pater. The Gemara says that that's the case where you have a flame, let's say on Rosh Hashanah, and you're going like this with your hand. You're fanning the flame. The flame goes into Rosh Hashanah. That situation where you're fanning the flame from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, that's not considered to be chayev. You're not carrying from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah because you're just fanning the flame. That's not considered carrying. What's the situation? Amud shall have is chayev. That if you carry a flame, you're chayev. So the Gemara gives two examples there, either Rav Sheshes or Abaya. I'm not, and Rashi over here says we're going with Abaya. I'm not 100% clear what's the difference between Rav Sheshes or Abaya. In both cases, they both hold that the situation of Amud shall have is that you're chayev is that you're going into a Rosh Hashanah carrying something, but that something is less than a shear, so you're not going to be chayiv on the carrying of that. And that thing that you're carrying that's less than a shear is a light, is a flame. So when you carry that from Shusayach to Shutzaram, that's what you're being chayiv on. So the Gemara says, a lot of time, chayiv this situation, somebody bringing in a flame into a Shutzaram, then you're chayiv on my chayiv. Why are you chayiv mashak? What you originally took, you're not from Shusayach, you're not placing that on Shutzaram, right? Because we know that you're not chayiv for it's on Shabbos. You have to take something from one Rishus and put it down in another Rishus. That's the only way you're chayiv. So the Gemara is saying that the fryer is different. What you took from the Rishus Yachin is not what you put down in the Rishus Harabim. They're different. And the fire is constantly changing. But the Gemara says, no, Nami Asa. That cannot be the case, because obviously we're saying Amud is chayev, and you want to ask why chayev, because what you picked up, you're not putting down. It's not the same thing. It's not true. Nami Asa. Rather, what you have to say is that there is an Isser, and the Isser still remains. The fire that you had is the fire that's here. That's why when you're mitzvah the Shalavis, and you put it down in the Rishus Harabim, when you picked it from Rishus Yachin, it's still considered enough of the same Isser being around. And since it's enough of the same Isser being around, you are chayav on it, on Shabbos for carrying. So therefore, what? There's enough of the flame, quote unquote, that's around, that we want to suggest that that's the same thing over here as well. So if that's the case, then the Yisrael, how could you say that he's able to, when he lit from the Nachri, how could you say that we're able to use that flame and say Bar Mariash on it? Why don't you say that the Isser is still here? Why? Because at the end of the day, the flame was that the Yisrael lit from the non-Jew. It's the same thing. It's still here. The same flame is still around. Says the Mono, you have to say, what you have to suggest is that what he's making a bracha on is not on the original flame, rather on the new, right? On the new, it's a new candle. It's going to be burning new wax, etc. And therefore, you can make a bar mariash on that. So in other words, back in the beginning of our brisa, we said that a nachri shedin Yisrael hidrim nachri. We said you're allowed to make a bracha of bar mariash on that. That's not a problem. We said, oh, but that's a question. How could you make a bar mariash on that? Isn't that a problem with the fact that you have a problem with Lo Shavas? The Gemara's answer, it's not a problem with Lo Shavas because you're not making a bracha on that aspect of the flame that existed before. You're making a bracha on the Tosefta, you're making a bracha on the new that is being continually lit and continuing now. So says the Gemara, okay, I understand. You have a new flame, a new candle, and you're making a bracha on the new aspect of it, even though the flame is sort of initially was around. I understand. But then what's the difference between a Yisrael who's lighting from a guy or a guy who's lighting from a guy? In both cases, the original flame is here. Now you have a new flame, a new candle. Say you're making a bracha on the Tosefta. What's the difference? Says the more so then what's the nafkamina? If you're saying the focus is on the Tosefta, not on the original Isser, or the original flame, so then what's the difference? How can you make a distinction between those two cases? The Gemara says you're right. You're right, says the Gemara. The truth is, there's no difference. Yisrael who lit from a guy lit from a Yisrael. In both those cases, we say it's fine. In both those cases, we say it's fine, and you can make a bracha mari'esh on that, even though that original candle that the guy lit could have been lit on Shabbos. Obviously, if a Yisrael is lighting from a guy, that could be lit on Shabbos. Whereas if a guy is lighting from Yisrael, so you could use it, that light happened on Motzei Shabbos. Happens when I accusing the Jew of having lit a candle on Shabbos. Or maybe he lit the candle on Shabbos or something that was mutter, like a chay or a chayil. So in those situations, we have no issue. So what about a guy lit from a guy? Should also be no issue. Someone says, you're right. There's no issue. If he lit from a guy, and the guy lit that candle on Shabbos, it's really no problem because we could say we're focusing on the Tosefta. However, we have a special concern when a guy lights from a guy, and that's Gzer Mishum Amud Rishon or Nachar Rishon, which means that you might come to a situation. You might come to a situation where, as Rashi says, that Isharisa benachri, shehidlik benachri, if you're going to allow a guy who lit from another guy after Shabbos, and then you're going to come to use that for Bar Merei, you might come to make a bracha on the first guy's candle. Otherwise, you won't. If you just know that you can make a Bar Merei on a guy who lit from a guy, you might not realize and sometimes come along and make a bracha Bar Merei on the first guy's candle, not just on the second guy's candle. So therefore, because of our concern, we're not worried about a guy who lit from Yisrael. We're not worried about Yisrael lit from a guy. That doesn't have this concern. We do have a concern. If a guy lit from a guy, then maybe you would end up coming to light sometime, the same Mara from the first guy. That, of course, would not be an Ersha Shabbos. Then you can't make a saying, oh, on the Tosefta, it's a new candle, whatever. You can't make that argument. So since you can't make that argument, therefore, we say you cannot make Bar Meresh a guy's candle who lit from another guy. Okay? So that's the Gezerah that the Gemara comes out with over here. Right? It wasn't added when it got dark. You're using the initial guy's candle. So Rashi gives an example that the situation is easy to imagine if the first guy lit the candle on Shabbos, close to getting dark, and you use that same candle to make a Bar Mariash right after Shabbos ended. So there's no argument that maybe there was a change, a new wax, a new candle. Like there's no real argument to say that, and that's what we want to avoid. That would be a situation where you're using a candle that wasn't Shabbos. Okay, continues the Gemara. I should just mention that this is the way Rashi and Pesach learn. The Ritva points out that on this basis, on Yom Kippur, we have a special chashash about an Ersha Shabbos, but we really try to avoid. And make sure we have a situation. The Ritva writes, he quotes the Ramban, that as a result of this, people would use the candle in shul to avoid this problem of maybe potentially using a guy's candle that wasn't Shabbos. So people use the candles from the shul would have these big lamps that would light the whole Yom Kippur. They would use that on Yom Kippur for their Motzei Yom Kippur ner. By us, right? Everybody lights a yahrzeit candle, right? You light a yahrzeit candle in Kippur in order to avoid this. So practically, this comes out of halacha. Shulchan Aruch brings down this Ritva name of the Ramban. So it actually does have a bit of an asking. Okay. Here's the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan. Somebody's walking outside. We're talking about a situation where somebody's walking in Motzei Shabbos, and he's walking outside a city, and he sees a candle. If the Rav of the city is Jewish, then he's able to make a bracha, a Bar Miresh on that plane. If the Rav of the city is not Jewish, he can't. The Gemara says, I don't understand. Gufa Kasha. And you can ask us steer on this. Amris and Rav Nachman and Mavarach. It sounds like what if the census says that the Rav of the city is not Jewish, so then you don't make a bracha. Mavarach. But if it's half and half, that sounds like the right idea. If you say Rav Nachman, you don't make a bracha, that means mechza, you do make a bracha. But then you say V'hadatanim Rav Yisrael Mavarach. But if it's a majority of the city is Jewish, then you do make a bracha Maresh. So which one is it? You can be medayik both ways. We have a question of what's the story about mechza mechza. The Gemara says, the truth is, really, if it was a half and half city, you could make the bracha bar eish. However, so then you're going to ask, well, why did he say If you just said Rav Nachman, then you can't be Mavarch, then you know Matzah, so you could be Mavarch. So why then you say a case of Rav Yisrael? So the Gemara says, "V'adid Tana Reish Rav Nachman Tana Sefer Rav Yisrael." We just wanted to keep the same sort of approach. Since we said Rav Nachman, we say Rav Yisrael, but don't make medayek that only if it's Rav Yisrael you can be Mavarch, but if it's Matzah, you can't be Mavarch. The truth is you can be Mavarch. If the city is Rav Yisrael, you can be Mavarch. If the city is Matzah of Yisrael, you can be Mavarch. You just can't be Mavarch Bar Mereish on a fire if the majority of the city is not Jewish. Again, the reason being that if the majority of the city is not Jewish, presumably you have the same problem of maybe it was lit on Shabbos, was on Rosh Hashanah, etc. Or maybe you have additional concerns. That's Rav Nachum. Maybe you have concerns about Avodah Zarah. Okay, continues the Gemara. So Tanur Rabbanan, another case. The Mahalach looked at Krach. Person was going outside the city. He sees a kid carrying a torch. So Baidik Akbar, you check after the kid. Im Yisrael hu Mavarch. If the kid's a Jew, so then you can make a mariation on the savuka. Im Nachyu ain't a Mavarch. If he's a guy, you can't. So Mar says, "My Aryatina, Kafilu Gadol Nami." Why are you saying it's specifically a kid? Why don't you say it to an adult? Find out if the person's a Jew or not Jew. If the person's not Jew, you can't make a bracha like we just explained. And if the person's a Jew, then obviously lit it after Shabbos, it's not a problem. You can use it. So says the Gemara, we're talking about a situation where they were walking right at the end of Shabbos. So Gadol Mucha Milta divided Nachru. It will be a Gadol, for sure be a guy. Why? There's no Yid, right? Unbelievable. Gemara, no Yid who's observant, but is going to light a flame so close to Shabbos ending. He's going to wait till for sure Shabbos is really over. Right? Someone to Shkias L'chamba before it says, he's not going to take some risks and light a candle before he 100% knows that it's not Shabbos. However, a Tinaik, Ema Yisrael, but maybe by a little kid, by a young person who's not a gadol, you could say maybe he's a Jew, and he lit his candle. He thought now is the end of Shabbos. He's more risky. Right? A gadol is more risk averse. He doesn't want to violate Shabbos. The kid is less risk averse. So therefore, the case that we have of somebody, obviously, with a situation where somebody's walking and wants to make Havdalah and doesn't have a flame, the odd situation that he was is not so odd then, because that's how people traveled, right? They would be walking around with candles. So this boy's walking around with a torch, and you have to ask him, "No, are you Jewish?" And if he says that he is a Jew, then we say, "Okay, you can make him Marish." But if he's a guy, then we say not, because again, maybe he had it. Maybe he was using it on Shabbos. Maybe he's using for Avodah Zarah. All the various different potential concerns that we could have. Okay. Again, how common was it in those days to have candles being lit by day? It's a fair question. I would imagine that people didn't really use candles until they had to, whether that would be indoors or out. But we don't want to make the assumption that the guy lit it for sure after Shabbos. Again, presumably because of the fear that we don't want to use the candles of Akum that are being, like Rabbi Shechin Misura said, because maybe it's being used for Avodah Zarah, maybe it was lit for Avodah Zarah. That's potentially one concern. The other concern is, again, was there an extra Shabbos? A guy lit the candle on Shabbos, and we don't want to be making a bracha mariash on that, and you don't know that either way. So that's why, again, we're trying to ascertain who is the provenance of this light. Where did it come from? Who lit it? When was it lit? Okay, next case, Tanur Rabbanan. Again, somebody's walking outside the city. And he sees a light. If it's a big light, like what? The mouth of a furnace. So then we say you could make a bracha of what? On it. What's the assumption? Rashi explains that we're talking about a kiln They used to bake the bricks, they put in the homes and stuff. So there was a situation where where um where it's very big. I should say, right? You're burning these bricks in order to, building things. If it's really bright, a big flame like it would come out of the mouth of the oven, then the hira barihu l'shtam nasis. It's not just made to use for the bricks, it's also made for the light. But if it's not that big, then it's only being utilized for what? And it's only being utilized for the bricks. It's only being utilized for the business at hand. So then Einam Avarchalav, then you can't use it. This now opens up another aspect, which is fire that you use for Bar Mary age is meant to be a situation where it's being used for light. It's being utilized to give people light. But fire that's not being utilized to give people light, let's forget other issues about Avodah Zarah, about Shabbat. There's a separate issue that when you use a candle for Bar Mary age, you want to use a candle that is being lit to provide light, not a candle that's being lit to provide something else. In this case, to provide a fire to bake bricks, or as we'll see other cases as well. So it says the Gemara, "Tinicha the arshal kivshem avarchlam." Either betani, either chem avarchlam. We have two prices. One says that you could make a bracha on the fire from a oven. One that says that you cannot. So the Gemara says, like kasha, the difference between the beginning of a process or the end of a process. In other words, in the beginning of a process, when you're just really using it just to make the bricks and you're not using it for the light, so then we shouldn't use that flame to say Maria Aish on it because it's not being used for light. But after the bricks are baked and the fire is still lit, so then you can say it's being utilized for providing light, in which case then you can say Bar Maria Aish on it. Another example, we have another price that says that a fire from an oven or a stove you could use. But I have another price that says you can't use it. It's more like kasha, again, the same exact point about the chila b'seif. The difference between the beginning and the end. If it's the beginning of a process, then it's being utilized to cook or whatever, to bake, whatever is being needed, and it's not really used to provide light. Therefore, since it's not used to provide light, don't say Maria Eshana. But at the end of a process, in other words, it's already baked, it's done its thing, whatever it needs to do. So then it's being utilized for its light, and then you could say Maria Eshana. Another example, we have another example of a situation of somebody who had a flame in shul or in the base of medrash. Then one says you're allowed to use it for mariage, one says you're not able to use it for mariage. It sounds again a stira like kasha as Rashi points out. What we mean to say is that if you have some important personage in the shul, you have adam chashav, so they lit the candles for him, then it's not being used for light; it's being used for his covet. So in that situation, if it's being used for his covet, as Rashi says, and not for light, you can't make a brach on it. But if it's a situation where it's not adam chashav in shul, so then it was being lit just for light, then you would be able to make a Bari Me'ari Ha'ish on it. I should point out that the Tosfos brings down here from Midrash the opposite. That they want to say the reverse, that if it's being Adam Chashav in the shul, then of course you could use it because it's being lit for the Adam Chashav. He could see where he's going, so it's being used for light. But if there's no Adam Chashav, so then it's being lit for other purposes in the shul, but not being used for light, so then you can't do it. So he has a different version. Okay. But we'll just go with the way Rashi learns. So according to Rashi, if there's Adam Chashav that's being lit for covet and not for light, so we can't say Bar Me'esh on it. So the Mar gives you another example. We could say that both prices are talking about a situation where it was Adam Chashav. We said that if it's Adam Chashav, so then for sure what the you can't say Bar Me'esh. So then what's the difference between the two cases? The Chazan HaKnesses is like a shamish. And the shamish would eat there in the shul. Rashi says, the shamish would eat. Maybe you would sleep in, take care of the shul. In English, it's the beetle, not the beetle like the singers. The beetle is Beedle, a beetle. The beetle will take care of the shul. You would eat in the shul. It needs to be around. So we could say that both Bryce and the situation was Adam Chashav. And Adam Chashav looked at like Rashi, that means that you're using it for his covet. Nevertheless, one is the situation was a chazan knesses, one is the situation wasn't a chazan knesses. If it's an adam chashav with a chazan knesses, then you can say you could use that light because the shamash needs it. He needs to eat, he needs to sleep, he needs to do whatever he does. So he needs the light, so therefore it's still a even if it's a chazan chashav, you could use the light and you can say mariage. But if there's no chazan knesses, it's only on the chashav, it's only for cover, then you can't make the bracha mariage. And then Mar gives a third permutation. It's a situation where there was Adam Chashav and there's a Chazan Knesses. We can still make a distinction and say why you shouldn't be able to use it. What's the reason? Because it was Tahara, there was moonlight. So in other words, if there's Adam Chashav and a Chazan Knesses, so you would say, oh, for sure they should be able to use it because of the fact that there's a Chazan Knesses who needs it to eat. No, it's a situation with a lot of moonlight. So there's moonlight, the Chazan Knesses would have lit a candle for himself and the Adam Chashav is only being lit for his covet. So then, according to Rashi, in that situation, you would not be able to use that for marriage. But if there was no moonlight, so then the Chazak needs to light it for himself. Then you would be able to, even if the Adam Chashav was for his covet, the Chazak needs it for his own uses, and that's why you'd be able to say marriage. Fine. Continues the Mortan Rabban Hayesh, Meisam Madrash Revi Orlov name. If they were sitting in this base Madrash, and they brought a line in front of them, Misham Yom Kolach V'Acham Baruch La'atzim. Misham says everyone should make a bracha for himself. But so one should make a bracha marriage for everybody. Mishum Shneimar, B'Roivam Hadras Melech. Again, we've talked about this Gemara before. The tensions in Rosh Hashanah and Aleph about tensions between Roivam Hadras Melech and all the situations reaching like demon. Which one do you do? Right? We talked about the situation of Shofar. We talked about this on Rosh Hashanah, right? It's the conflict that is reason Magdim should say you say Hallel during Shachar, not during Musaf. Because reason Magdim should say you should do Shkiat Shef by Shachar, not by Musaf. My answer, no. That Berev Amahadas Melech pushes you out to say, well, there's most people there for Shkiat Shef, that's why you do that in Musaf. But for Hallel, we're not focusing on the Berev Amahadas Melech, focusing on this reason Magdim, and that's why you say that during Shachar. So over here, Basil is saying Berev Amahadas Melech, and more people that say Amen to the bracha, they're all together thanking Hashem for creating fire, which is a creation which shines on Rishon and Gan Eden. So therefore, we want to do it together in unison. So the Mercer Bishlam is some Parshat time. Beisol makes sense because he's giving us a reason. B'Shamai time Kasabri. B'Shamai time. What's the reason of B'Shamai? He didn't give us a reason. Kasabri means the Bish managed. It's a word. Bittul Bish managed. What does it mean? It means that if you wait for everybody to get together to say, Maria, hey, you're going to take off time. People could be learning. This Lashon of Bittul Beis Medrash appears one other time in Shas and Gemara Shabbos. Kuf Ted Vav. The Mishnah there tells that you don't do ksuvim between by Shal Shudas. And the reason was because Bittul Beis Medrash. What does that mean? The Gemara you have to look into the Zion over there to the whole discussion. Fine. Says the Mortana another issue Bittul Beis Medrash is what? They wouldn't say Gesundheit. They wouldn't say Astu says. Rashi says because Bittul Shas here the Gilna Shas. I don't know why he decides to go on a Yush Arichos to bring down the figure of Belezer about how as you know, everyone knows the little Medrash says that there was nobody used to die until they sneezed. When they sneezed, they died. And then Yaakov even asked that they should get sick first, and so it became sneezes, not doesn't mean death sentence anymore. But we say it became a thing. When somebody sneezes, you say, "Oh, to your health," because people used to die from it. Fine, but Ramil says you don't say that, and Beis Medrash because it's Bittul Beis Medrash. It was so busy learning not to wait for a second. You don't have time to say bless you. Says you don't make a bracha on the ner b'sam of dead people. My time ner l'kavod Davida b'sam la'avur reichu Davidi. Why? Because they're not being utilized for the things that we said. Right? You need to have in a ner the idea that it's being used for its light. But the ner, when it's being lit by a mace, is just for the cover of the mace. B'samim is to take away the smell of a dead person. So it's not being utilized for its actual smell. If they're for a dead person, they take a candle in front of him whenever they move him around by day or by night, then you can't use it because it's really there for the dead person. But if they would move around a dead person, they wouldn't be losing a candle except for a night. So then again, the reason that they're lighting it is not for the dead person because they're not giving him cover with the candle. The reason they're lighting it is because they can't see where they're going. And so therefore they want to make sure that they're going in the right direction. So that's where they live. So the light is not being utilized for the dead person. It's being utilized to be able to see. So therefore you should be able to make a bracha. I remember food of assumption based like he say. So if you have the potpourri in the bathroom, right? Potpourri in the bathroom or these other scented things that make the bathroom smell better. Or you have some sort of scented oil that helps remove smell. And that you're not able to make a bracha on it. Why? Because again, it's not being utilized for its smell. It's being utilized to remove a bad smell. So if it's not being utilized to provide a good smell, you can't make a bracha on it. But if it's only being utilized to remove a bad smell, right, that is a situation where you cannot make a bracha on it. It says the lav l'recha abid lo mevarach on aliyah. Are you going to say that every single time we have a situation where it's not being made in order to provide a nice smell, you're not able to make a bracha on it? Is that what you mean? Basically, I'll ask you a question. The Brachot tells us that they said if somebody goes into a perfumery, a perfume person's shop, and he smells a nice smell, that he only makes a bracha once. But if he comes in and out of the store, he has to make a bracha each and every time. So the Gemara says, over here, obviously, he's not coming in order to be able to smell. The smells in the shop are not being made to smell, and nevertheless, you still make a bracha. The Havni of the Gemara is very hard for me to understand. What do you mean? That is a perfumery. They have the smells, not really the smell. I think what it means is that the smells are not there to provide a constant smell. They're there, according to Havni of the Gemara, because that's what the items are to smell. But the smell is there for when the customer comes and he's going to smell it. That's when it's being utilized to smell, but not like the whole time to provide smell. That's not what it's there for. The Gemara says no, and the recha nami David. It really is being used for smell the whole time. They want people to smell it. They want people to come into the store and be like, oh, there's like they sell in stores now scents that you could put into the what's it called, the outlet, and they smell like the Waldorf Astoria hotel, or like this hotel, or like this. There are certain scents that everyone associates the smell with something. You walk by a perfume shop and you have a certain smell that's going to draw you into. That's part of the business. So in fact, it's part of the business that's being made this smells. Of course, you should be able to take a bracha on it. Says the a situation similar to the situation of the candle. If you were going past the city and you smelled a really nice smell, if it's Rev Avdicham, you can't make a bracha. Rabbi Yisrael Mevarach, again, the same thing we had before. Rabbi Yossi, I feel Rabbi Yisrael Nami Ein Mevarach. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Says even if it's Rabbi Yisrael, shouldn't make a bracha on it. Why? He says the reason is because these Jewish women, they're a bunch of machshefes, and they're using the smell, the ketores, whatever they're making for their kishuf. So it says about atakul kshafim katrin. What? You think that such a chashash that maybe all the Jewish girls are making perfume for their kishuf? Says the Gemara, okay, maybe it's a miyat for kshafim, but but there's also a miyat that's going to be in order to perfume their clothes, meaning, but not for smell, not for making a good smell, to taking out the bad smell, right? Because remember, they didn't have deodorant in those days. They walked around, they sweated all day, right? And the European or Israeli bus in the summer. So how do you make the smell go away? You can either wash it or perfume it. So they would make a nice smell in order to get the clothes to be smelling better. So since you have a miyat for kshaf and miyat for kalim, so then then you have a majority that really wasn't being used for smelling nice. So if it wasn't being used for smell, you shouldn't make a bracha on it because the majority is not there for just to provide a nice smell. If somebody's going on Motzei Shabbos in Tveria, Motzei Shabbos B'Tzipari, if somebody's going Erev Shabbos in Tveria, or Motzei Shabbos in Tzipari, v'harech reach, and you smell the nice smell, so Eino Mavarch, you should not make a bracha on the nice smell. Rashi says that when we say we shouldn't make a nice bracha on the smell, we mean the Bari Atzi B'Sam, you shouldn't make a bracha. But maybe you should be able to make a bracha of Arev, like we said before, Bari Shem and Arev, more before we had in Gimel, in case I'm Mavarchim. Maybe. Okay, we can't get into that right now. But it sounded like from the Gemara that you're not making a bracha. Rashi's clarifying which bracha you're not making, but maybe there's another bracha to make. Okay, we'll have to leave that on the side. But Rabbi Yochanan is saying that in these places, the reason you shouldn't make a bracha, why because really, there's a chazaka that in Sipari, on Motzei Shabbos and in Tveria Erev Shabbos, people are really using it to make their clothes smell nice, and they're not using it just to smell, and therefore you should make a bracha on that. If you're going to a shuk of akum, meaning a place where they have getchkas and you have all the guitars that they have for this stuff, and you like you say you want to smell, then you're a sinner. You shouldn't be smelling that kind of stuff. Obviously, if you get the bracha of bourbon and some, just in general, you shouldn't be smelling it. All right, turn the page. Right, you're not supposed to make a bracha on the nair until you actually use the fire, until you use it. That's what we, as I pointed out, we put our fingers by the candle to try to see some light and utilize the light to see our fingers better. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marat, lo yaisu, when you say that you're not supposed to make a bracha until you utilize it, yaisu mamish. Do you think that it means that in mamish you have to mamish use it? That afshafil lo inena, says Rashi, mimenu mevarchim, that even if you didn't have any hana on it, that you're able to make a bracha. My achi yaisu achi. So Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, you don't really have to use it mamish. Lo ye'osi yosi mamish. You don't mamish have to use it. El kol she'ilu oime v'karv mishtamish l'oira afilu b'rachim makim. If you were theoretically close, you'd be able to utilize it. And even if you're standing far away, you're able to make a bracha on it. This is the approach of Rav. And Rav Ashi says this as well. But the Gemara asks, and we pass like the Gemara asking. Of course, you're able to use it from a distance, but it has to be able to be utilized from close. If somebody has a candle that's sort of hidden by them, so it's not being able to be utilized, right, meaning a dimmed lantern, or it's hidden in some way, or you see the flame and you're not able to use the light, so you're able to see the light, but you can't see the flame, right? In these situations, so this Bryce says that you cannot make a bracha of a bar ish on this candle until you see the light and you use the light. So I understand a situation where you're using the light, but you don't see the flame. Right? If it's a situation where you have a right angle, so you have somebody carrying a flame and somebody sees the light but doesn't see the flame. So I understand that situation. But what's the situation where somebody sees the fire but doesn't able to mishtamish, or what's the situation? Presumably, maybe because he's far away. So therefore, since he's far away, he's not able to use it. So therefore, since he can't use it, you can't make a bracha on it. It says, well, no, you're going to amna v'azla. Right? It means that the flame was going down and down and down. It was once a flame, but it was getting diminished, and that's why we don't want you to make a bracha mari'esh on it. But halacha, if it's a situation where the flame is hidden, you are not supposed to make a bracha on it. But if it's a situation where the light is there, even if you're standing now at a distance, but those that are close are able to use it, then of course you're able to make a bracha on it. We'll have to stop over here.